The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the host or the podcast. Additionally, opinions of the host and guests are just that, opinions. Any political commentary or discussions of public figures are shared as personal opinions for conversational and entertainment purposes only. This content is not intended as professional, medical, legal, or financial advice. And with that, enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Pivot Stories with Leonna Hatcher. I'm your host, Leonna Hatcher. This is a podcast where we explore the moments that disrupt our lives, challenge our identities, and ultimately invite us into something that is deeper, freer, and more aligned. Welcome. It is spring outside. It is beautiful. The birds are literally singing. I'm not even kidding. They're outside my window right now. And it's just really nice to have this 65, 70-degree weather, is what my husband refers to as Florida winter. But listen, it's nothing compared to the wild winter that we were having. So I welcome the weather and I'm so happy to be here. I took a little spring break. I guess you can say, and I'm back. I think it was more so of like a tech break because I needed it. Sometimes when you do like a lot of output, you're online a lot and you're doing a lot of like screen time, it is good to kind of step away and ground yourself a little bit and come back and regroup. So I'm back. Took a, I guess, end of season break because this is season one. More than likely, this will be my last episode of the season. And then what I'm thinking of doing is regrouping and coming back with stories, more pivot stories, but from like a different angle. And for example, stories about women who are still currently in corporate or in their 9 to 5 and they're in the process of pivoting. I also want to talk to Gen Z. Gen Z is having a really hard time right now finding work or keeping work. And I want to have conversations about how they're pivoting, probably from the degree that they earned to more strategic ways of finding work. And it'll make more sense when we get into our topic for today, because the topic for today is all about Gen Z and what is going on with them right now in the workforce. Um, I want to start off by saying that I absolutely adore Gen Z. I love their bravery, their emotional honesty, their ability to say what's on their mind. I think they're going to change how work is done from here on out. In another life, I was a union organizer. And being a having a background in political science, I joined the labor movement because I really wanted to affect change. And this sort of reminds me, like, the evolution of like how where work is going to go, sort of reminds me of how the folks who were instrumental in the labor union changed the work week from I don't know, 18-hour, 20-hour work day to an 8-hour work day, a 40-hour work week, and how they really fought for the right to have a work-life balance and the right to be treated as human beings at work. And I think what we're seeing with Gen Z is an evolution of that. I don't think that boomers, Gen X, or even some millennials are quite ready for that. But you're gonna have to get ready because this is the new generation. And I know right now, Gen Z, according to several reports, are having trouble not just finding work, but keeping work because there's a stigma around their value system. And we're gonna get into that a little bit. Um, I really want to, I'm excited about what this new generation is gonna do for work. And in a lot of ways, like I want to help guide them. I really, really do. For those of you who don't know, I am a career coach, as well as a talent acquisition professional and a children's book author. And hopefully, because I'm in the process of writing a novel, an author of a novel that's going to be coming out in the foreseeable future. So, um, I do a lot of different things. And in my career coaching practice, like one of the things that I have noticed is that a lot of Gen Z are rejecting the norms of how work is done right now. So I am not surprised about what's going on right now in the job market because I've been seeing it for the last few years, since 2024, since 2024, I've been seeing this with Gen Z. So I'm really not surprised. But without further ado, let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to do is pull up an article. Um, and then we're going to get into a clip that I saw earlier this week, which kind of sparked all of this, me wanting to discuss all of this with you. Let me go ahead and see if I can share screens. So this article was written in December of 2024 by Liz Elting, and this is from Forbes magazine. The title reads, Managers don't want to hire Gen Z workers, citing a lack of soft skills, survey says. Yikes. Okay, it's not good. So, recent Gen Z college graduates have had to face an uphill battle as they enter the workforce. A new General Assembly survey found that over a quarter of executives wouldn't even consider hiring a recent college graduate today. And it's not even because young entry-level hires aren't knowledgeable enough to complete the tasks listed in their job descriptions. Rather, surveyed managers feel the most significant shortcoming of Gen Z workers is a lack of critical interpersonal skills, often referred to as soft skills. This include communication, problem solving, creativity, collaboration, adaptability, conflict resolution, and other skills that are typically developed through firsthand experience rather than instruction and are vital to professional success. Ouch. All right, so that was harsh. And I immediately have about, let me see, two or three thoughts that come to mind when I read this. One, I don't think it's that they necessarily don't have the soft skills. I think their soft skills are just different. I think maybe what older generations consider professionalism at work, Gen Z don't necessarily think it is necessary or critical to conduct yourselves that way. I think part of the issue is that Gen Z values emotional honesty, which can be, how do I say this? Perceived as having a lack of boundaries, and they may tend to overshare or say what immediately frustrates them because they're so honest about their emotions. And I think older generations may find that off-putting. And I think that's where that comes in. So, whereas you have someone maybe from Gen X, an older millennial will get a task that is clearly not a task that is manageable or realistic to complete. They may say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll do my best to do it. And in their mind, like, this manager is crazy. I can't possibly get this done. But the timeline that I have, with everything that I have on my plate, this is not okay. In their minds, but they will still burn the midnight oil, burn the candle from both ends, and do what they need to do to get it done. Gen Z is going to let you know that this is what I have on my plate. This is insurmountable. There's no way that I can complete this task in a timely manner while still maintaining my sanity. And I think a lot of managers are probably going to be shocked by that. But I love it. Not even low key, I high key love it. Okay. Another thing that comes to mind is that this is the first generation to enter the workforce after a global pandemic. And so their value systems are different. They're looking at work very differently and how work centers into their life very differently. Their value system is completely different. I know I've changed since COVID, okay, in terms of what I value and what matters most to me. And I think if me, a woman in her 40s, can have that transformation, I could only imagine what the first generation entering the workforce after a global pandemic might have gone through and how their values not just shifted, because I don't think it was a shift of how their values were molded as a result of this. Okay. Um, and another thing that comes to mind is that this generation is online a lot. A lot of their communication is via text, social media, video chats. There's not a lot of personal one-on-one. And even during the time when they were in college, and university, when they were learning those entry-level skills outside of maybe a high school setting, they were online because they were in a global pandemic. A lot of their social life was online during that time. And so maybe there is some soft skills that are lacking. That, along with brutal emotional honesty is probably a lot to take. Okay. So that's where I see it. I'm gonna continue with the article. Unfortunately, a lack of soft skills among younger workers is leading companies to hire fewer college graduates. That's unfortunate. And this is already having ripple effects for the broader American workforce. Strata Institute for the Future of Work and the Burning Glass Institute discovered that over half of recent four-year college graduates are underemployed a year after they graduate. Wow. According to their Talent Disrupted report, soft skills, soft skill insufficiency is also affecting the jobs of managers who are already finding themselves overworked following a string of mid-level management corporate layoffs. Yeah. According to new research from online education magazine Intelligent.com, one in five managers have considered quitting due to stress of overseeing Gen Z workers. And 75% of managers may say they hire more. Sorry, I'm laughing a little bit. It's not funny, but yeah, it's about 75% of managers say they require more time and resources than other employees of different generations. So why I chuckled a little bit is the stress of overseeing Gen Z workers. I think oftentimes we're so resistant to change that we throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. And I think part of it, part of the frustration is because they don't quite understand this generation. And so they're letting go of them, thinking that they can hire someone else to, fill the spot. Um, and then they're realizing that there may be not a lot of people with the skill set that Gen Z has, but the soft skills that Gen Z have are probably driving them crazy. And I think what needs to happen is that these hiring managers and mid-level management need to find a way to kind of work with Gen Z instead of, you know, firing them. So, um, and they need to find help on how to relate to Gen Z, I think, personally, rather than completely chucking a large workforce, which is needed for this economy. Social isolation during the pandemic, okay, I mentioned that before, is cited as the main reason why younger workers feel unprepared to enter today's workforce. Like I said, I'm reading this with you. I scanned it a little bit, mostly the title, quite honestly, before I started reading. So yeah, it's just interesting to see that I was on the right track. A Gartner report found that 46% of Gen Z employees say the pandemic made pursuing educational or career goals more difficult. During the pandemic, younger generations primarily went to school remotely. Without in-person connections and interactions at school, Gen Z missed out on developing soft skills such as negotiating, networking, speaking confidently in front of crowds, and developing social stamina and attentiveness required to work long hours in an in-person environment. There is no arguing that to do a job correctly, employees need to hone hard skills, that is, specific technical abilities, which practically every job requires. For instance, workers have to understand how to write code, how to develop a product. Yet without soft skills, those same workers might not know how to coordinate with colleagues and other teams involved in the project, or they might not know when and how to communicate their questions to team leads during the planning process. Yeah. Regardless of what field you're in, soft skills are necessary for success. And while it might seem easier in the short term to throw away job applications from younger workers, it won't serve businesses in the long run. Definitely not. Failing to hire and cultivate young talent simply isn't sustainable or right. I wholeheartedly agree. Moreover, overlooking Gen Z workers means passing on incredibly tech savvy, adaptive, innovative, bold, and diverse talent pool with fresh perspectives. I 100% agree. We're missing out if we're doing this. Failing to invest in Gen Z professional development is a grave error to businesses with is a grave error that businesses will ultimately pay for one way or the other. Rather than not hiring younger workers altogether, businesses should consider offering training that teaches them key soft skills according to a survey conducted by Resume Builder in response to Gen Z employees struggling with soft skills. 45% of companies began offering specialized classes to get them up to speed. Out of the companies surveyed, around two-thirds found these classes to be highly successful. I agree. Let's see. Anything else here I want to mention? This is more of the same as to why businesses can't shut out Gen Z graduates to unemployment because they haven't yet been given the opportunity to develop critical interpersonal skills. So here's the thing. Critical interpersonal skills are things that you can teach. Hard skills, coding, tech skills, um, uh, any STEM skills or, accounting or finance, these are things that you definitely need for the workforce. And having these Gen Z employees come in with those hard skills will benefit any organizations. You can teach the soft skills. You can teach them how to do the things that you need them to do in regards to how to communicate, etc. And I've seen companies do it effectively. I've seen companies offer, there's one company I'm thinking of out of Boca Raton, Florida, that offers communication classes. And what's that organization called? It's on the tip of my tongue. The organization that does the public speaking. Can't think of it right now. What's the name of? I'm gonna have to Google this. Give me 1 second. Toastmasters. Yeah. Toastmasters. Okay. So they even offer Toastmasters at the company. And I've seen people like really grow and benefit from those classes. I know someone who started off um a very dynamic person, great personality, but was nervous when speaking in front of others. Take that communication class and join Toastmasters and like took off to the point where they were leading big presentations for the company at the beginning of the year. Like a huge like difference from start to where they are now. And it can be done for sure. Let's take a look at the General Assembly survey that this article is based on. It says, are today's entry-level employees ready for the job? Survey says not quite. How prepared are today's entry-level workers for the demand of modern workforce compared to about 5 years ago? According to a recent survey we conducted, many employees and executives feel that new professionals across industries aren't quite hitting the mark. In fact, only 48% of employees and 12% of mid-level execs believe entry-level employees are prepared for their roles. And when they say entry level, they mean Gen Z. To clarify, our survey revealed that more than a quarter of vice presidents and directors alike, 27%, based on their survey, would pass on hiring today's entry-level employees. Among adults overall, 23% echoed this sentiment. This reluctance may be a sign that current hiring strategies and training models need a refresh, I think, yes, to keep pace with evolving workforce demands. The survey also highlights that a lack of training resources at many companies, with one-third of executives and one quarter of employees saying that employers don't provide sufficient training for new hires. And a striking 58% of those who believe entry-level employees aren't ready for the workforce also say that their companies don't offer enough training. This shortfall makes it challenging for new employees, as well as existing employees, to meet job expectations, especially in fast-paced or technical roles. So there's also a training gap. And I'll be interested to know if after the pandemic, like especially in 2024, when all of those layoffs were going on prior in years prior, right? So we saw some layoffs, a lot of tech layoffs in 2022 and 2023, and some continued in 2024. I wonder what percentage of that was the training department or the HR department, and how that impacted new hires. That'd be interesting to know, and something I would like to look into. Workforce readiness is a shared responsibility, the article goes on to say. So, who should be responsible for making sure entry-level employees have the skills they need? While the majority of employees, 64%, and executives, 74%, believe individuals should take charge of their own job readiness, many also think companies, 63% of employees and 66% of execs, and educational institutions, 53% of employees, 73% of execs share this responsibility. Yes, they do. If you're hiring someone coming into a new role, especially entry level, you have to teach or train. I think not just how to do the job, but company culture and the way things are done in your organization. That's something that training needs to happen for that. I think personally. Okay, so that was the survey or the report that the Forbes article was based on. I want to show you a clip of a video I saw from USA Today, and I saw this on YouTube earlier this week.
Recent headline is raising questions about the youngest workers in the labor force, Gen Z. Some employers say they're hiring Gen Z employees only to let them go within months, citing gaps in communication, professionalism, and workplace readiness. But this kind of criticism isn't exactly new. Previous generations faced similar labels when they first entered the workforce, even as the nature of work itself was shifting. So, what's really going on here? Is this a Gen Z problem or a workplace problem? Hello and welcome to USA Today's The Excerpt. I'm Dana Taylor, here to dig into Gen Z and how they can be successful in the labor force in the age of AI. Is Susie Welch, professor at NYU's Stern School of Business. So good to speak with you, Susie.
Thanks for having me.
The unemployment rate for recent college grads, per the latest data released by the Federal Reserve of New York at the end of 2025, is 5.7%. That's roughly a point and a half higher than it is for other age cohorts. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a confluence of events. I was with a student who came to my office the other day. She's got a degree in computer science. She's very good at math, and she cannot find a job. And she was in such a state of despair. I just want to put a human face to these numbers. And she was a very talented young woman. And I said to her, I think you're going to have to open your aperture about the jobs that you're looking at, because she was looking for what the conveyor belt would typically dump her at. There's a conveyor belt when you've got a certain degree, and the conveyor belts went to certain jobs, and there's softness in those jobs as employers are reluctant to hire, thinking that AI might be able to do these entry level jobs, and so they're moving more slowly. And then they have been a bit burned by their AI, by their Gen Z hires, as we know. And so I think that there's structural reasons and there's very modern reasons about what's going on.
I want to turn now to Gen Z's ability to keep jobs once they've been hired. A recent survey by intelligent.com that made headlines says that 6 in 10 employers say they're letting Gen Z hires go within months. What does that stat actually tell us, and what's missing from it?
I think that stat tells us the truth, what's going on, and I have an interesting perspective on it, perhaps, which is that I have interesting research that might shed some light on it. I teach two classes at NYU. One is management, the classic management class that you would have at any business school, and then I also teach a class called Becoming You, which is a class that helps students figure out what they should do with their life. Which is my timing on teaching that class was quite prescient coming out of the pandemic. For this class, the premise is that your purpose in life lies at the intersection of your values, your aptitudes, and your interests. So, with that as a setup, I'll say that I end up creating a tool called the Values Bridge, which discerns and rank orders individuals' values from 1 to 16. It's a fully scientifically validated test, and in the past year, about 200,000 people have taken it. And so we are able to cut this very large data set by generation, and I cut the data to find out what Gen Z's values were. And once I had that list, I did a second survey interviewing hiring managers, 25,000 hiring managers over the ages of 40 who manage more than 5 people. And we asked them, what are the values that you're looking for in the Gen Z people that you're hiring? And I got that list. And then I cross-referenced that data. And what it showed is that only 2% of Gen Z has the values that hiring managers want and are.
I'm gonna stop it right there for a second. Only 2% of Gen Z hires have what hiring managers are looking for when it comes to their soft skills. That is wild. I don't think there's been such a big gap ever. I think in generational gap as far as like what managers are looking for and what entry level new hires have to offer. That is concerning, and she's gonna go into it more a little bit, but I just want you to keep that in mind as we continue to watch the video.
For. So what ends up happening in my estimations is a staggering number, 2%, staggering. And I think when people say, oh, this has happened in previous generations, the young folks come along and the old folks say, that's not the way I was. Yeah, that's true, but not at this magnitude.
As she said, like this has happened in previous generations before, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video, when I talked about the labor union and the move from to a 5-day work week and 8-hour day and a 40-hour work week. I think those were incredible gains that were made by a newer generation that saw how work was being done and felt like they needed a better quality of life, and it has positively impacted our how we work today. And I think this is what's going to happen with Gen Z, but I think what is occurring is that it's happening at such a drastic rate because Gen Z went through like such a huge change during the pandemic. I think that it's jarring for the older generations, and I think this is what's impacting how Gen Z is being hired and retained today.
98% do not have the values that hiring managers are looking for. Only 2% do. That's crazy magnitude. And so what's happening is they're getting them in, they're seeing if they can change them. When they don't change them, they say, I've had enough of this, and out they go. And I think that's what we're seeing. So just to be more specific, Gen Z's top 3 values. Number 1 is what we call in the survey eudaimonia. That's self-care. That's the Greek word for flourishing. When I use the word self-care, usually people's heads explode. So I always just use this more neutral name, eudaimonia, but it does mean self-care, personal flourishing, recreation, and leisure. Their second value is.
Isn't it wild that when someone says self-care, like people like it's like a negative connotation? Like what a world we live in. But yes, that is a core Gen Z value, which I admire.
Voice, which is authentic self-expression. They want to be themselves at all time, and they want to be very authentic in the workplace. And their number 3 value is helping others, which is a beautiful and noble value. For hiring managers, the number 1 value that they're looking for is achievement, the desire to win. The number 2 value that they're looking for is work centrism, the desire to work. And the number three value that they're looking for is scope, which is the desire for learning and activity and adventure, which would generally I would translate in the workplace as travel.
Yeah.
So that's a gigantic mismatch in values, and that's what we're seeing play out. And because the market is favoring the buyer, the employer right now, not the seller, the employee, the buyer is saying, I'm not liking this. I'm returning it to the store. And
That is a really good point. The last point that she made is that now the market is favoring the hiring managers and not the candidates because there is such like unemployment uh is where it's at right now. I think that that is actually a key point. I wonder how different it would be for Gen Z if it was flipped, if hiring managers needed to hire them. Would there be more of a sense of urgency to properly train and or adapt to what Gen Z needs? And I say that to say when millennials enter the workforce, we were the first to introduce certain things like work-life balance and self-care into like the job, like I don't know, the work zeitgeist, right? Into like the into how work was done or, requiring like, oh, maybe I can, negotiate for an extra week of vacation, for example, and taking our PTO, going on vacation, spending our money on experiences and things like that. And even how we do work, and how we adapt to work culture. Um, Millennials, we speak up for ourselves at work. We, say what we like and say what we don't like. And I think that, but in addition to that, we're really hard workers and we have the soft skills to properly communicate what we want, what we don't want. But it was very difficult for hiring managers. And I was a recruiter during the time when a lot of the younger millennials were being hired into the workforce, and I had to almost translate certain things for hiring managers so they really understood where some of the millennial hires were coming from because I was hiring for interns and early career or recent college grad roles. I think that there was a need during that time and they really needed this new talent. And so a lot of hiring managers, a lot of companies adapted to what millennials wanted in terms of how they worked. And I think right now is a little different for Gen Z because companies don't have to. I think that's a key point. So I'll keep it going.
to go look for a model that I like better.
So when we look at employers, what they're saying Gen Z workers aren't doing, aren't meeting expectations, what are they specifically pointing to? What's the gap that Gen Z needs to, or maybe this is on employers as well, but what's the gap, the common gap that you're hearing about?
The gap is, just look at the numbers again. The gap is that employers want workers to care about winning and working. And Gen Z employees care about self-care and individuality. So that's the gap. And it shows up every day in kind of minor ways. Is like the bosses are at the office early and they stay late and they care if they win or lose a client. And they are worried about competition and how money is spent. And Gen Z's basically saying, I don't like those rules. Those were your values, and they didn't work out so well for your generation. I'm not going to buy them. My parents had those values and they got unemployed at age 54. One thing I will say is that my area of research involves values expression, which is how these values play out in the real world. And I am not a specialist at all in values formation. So I can only report these statistics. I can't tell you how Gen Z came to their values, but I teach Gen Z day in and day out. And so I ask them, hey, why is it that achievement, okay, the achievement is the value, and work centrism is another value that employers want. For Gen Z, achievement is number 12 as a value, and work centrism is number 13. All right, so they do not value these things that the oldsters like myself and most hiring managers want. And look, I want to say I love Gen Z. I teach them. I know them personally. I there's wonderful, wonderful things about them. I'm not part of the hate Gen Z, dynamic out there. But there definitely is a gap between the ways they want to act at work and the ways their managers want them to act.
Okay, I'm going to stop it here. Very interesting conversation. And like her, I do not hate Gen Z at all. I think they are remarkable and fascinating. One of the things that I really love about one of the examples of um the Gen Z, like what I call their superpower is, and I absolutely agree with her. I'm 100% rooting for Gen Z, and I actually love the way they're changing work or they're going to change work. I don't think it's happening quite yet, maybe incrementally, but one of these days we're going to look back at them as pioneers, I believe, in terms of how they changed the workforce. And one of the best examples of that for me is when Naomi Osaka started the conversation around mental health. And I think um, uh, the gymnast Simone Biles also did as well. There's a lot of pressure in having athletes at their level and their caliber decide that, hey, I need some time. I need a mental health break. I need to take time for myself in order to come back better than ever and watch them come back better than ever and exceed and excel is definitely like, I think, a model that a lot of older generations, like for them, it kind of blew their mind. Like, no, you don't quit. For example, right now, I had for example, I had this conversation with a friend last week, and we were having the conversation about like how our parents didn't really take time off, didn't really use their PTO or their vacation time until there was a funeral or an illness or something tragic happening in their lives or the lives of their families, but they didn't really use their time off to take a vacation and go enjoy themselves. It was work, 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 a la Rihanna, for like, the entire tenure, of their job with me, 20 years, 30 years. Like there are people who they're baby boomers that I know and Gen Xers that I know that have been on their jobs for 20 or 30 years and have never taken a for real vacation. Like at all. It's wild. And I think that um with millennials, like that definitely changed. I didn't want to be like my parents. In terms of that, I wanted to take my vacation time and go someplace that I really enjoyed and I would have the memories and I was able to relax and just sort of like disconnect from work for a week or two. And I think Gen Z is taking it even further. Not only do I want a vacation, but I am going to take a mental health day. I am going to take time, to take care of my emotional needs. And oh, if this is burning me out, it's not sustainable. So I'm not going to take on this project. We're going to have to hire more help, or, you're going to have to give it to someone else, get someone else to do it. I actually applaud that. I do. And I think eventually companies just gonna have to get with a program because working a job for 20 to 30 years, never taking vacation and taking charge of your mental health and retiring only to pass away a month or two later is not a quality of life. And I've seen that happen to way too many people. So in regards to Gen Z, I think the conversation needs to be about training, not just like hard skills, but company culture and soft skills as well when it comes to new hires. I think that that's going to be important because I don't think it's going to be sustainable, as the article mentions, to completely chuck like an entire generation from the workforce. You're going to miss out on all the amazing things. Like that's the definition of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and we don't want to do that. I think for Gen Z, though, in terms of taking charge of your hireability and your retainability, if that's a word, or keeping your job, I think that there are definitely some things to learn. And don't take these findings and these survey results as a uh don't take it as like a shot at your generation. Take it as, okay, um, this is where we're at, and okay, yeah, we this is who we are, but what can I do moving forward to overcome this? Because as much as they're going to have to get with the program in terms of like understanding how Gen Z works and eventually bend into what you require, you're also going to have to, Gen Z, I'm speaking to Gen Z now, you're also going to have to understand this generation and be able to speak their language. And this is something that I am currently coaching for Gen Z. And I want you to understand how to engage and learn the language of the workplace. So, for example, one of the core Gen Z values that I admire is work-life balance. I think this is a millennial value as well. But instead of mentioning work-life balance when you're having conversations with your colleagues and your managers, or even during a job interview, you can say something like, I am focused on sustainability and long-term performance. Because that's really what work-life balance is. In order to perform at a consistent rate long term, work-life balance is necessary, but you don't have to use work-life balance. You can say sustainability and long-term performance. Okay. Another core value of Gen Z is flexibility. Okay. Gen Z want to be able to be flexible in terms of like whether it's at work, in the projects that they're doing, or whether it's the ability to work from home, for example. So, flexibility is major for that generation. You can say, instead of saying I value flexibility when it comes to a job interview or having a conversation with your boss or your manager, I do my best work in environments that support productivity and autonomy. That's another way of saying I value flexibility. Another core value of Gen Z that I admire and I applaud 100% is I value mental health, or I care about mental health, right? So instead of talking about mental health, which is for some people like a trigger for whatever reason, talking about mental health, pun intended, I understand the importance of resilience, boundaries, and preventing burnout. That's essentially another way of saying I care about mental health. And so when you learn to have the proper language for the workforce, you can thrive in the workforce. And those soft skills could be taught. And soft skills is all about like how to better communicate and when to communicate in terms of professionalism on your job. Gen Z tends to value transparency, which can often be seen as oversharing, as I mentioned before. And so it can come across as being a little too much instead of emotional honesty. And I think that is actually a strength, but it also requires discernment. So being able to honestly say what you see and how you see it is something that other generations really don't have. Not at the level that Gen Z has it, but using discernment and knowing how to wield that power is important because it is a superpower. That is absolutely your superpower. And I adore it, but it's how you use it. You don't have to explain or go in detail about every single struggle, every frustration that you possibly went through during the day, or every challenge needs to be um, talked about uh, all the time, right? You don't need to challenge everything immediately either. You can take what you understand about what's going on, all your frustrations, all of your challenges, you make note of it, and then you come up with a solution before presenting it. So your ability to discern those challenges and frustrations and to see where things are off is very high emotional intelligence. But the soft skills and how and when to communicate it is what you need to work on. So it's actually a benefit to organizations. We just have to, as Gen Zers, you just have to realize when to use it. Um, Professional maturity is all about timing, emotional regulation, and knowing when conversations should be had. That's key. It's not about if, it's about how or when, right? Because what you have to say is important. Another thing that's important and key for Gen Z is what I've noticed is that, and I have this too, which is something that I had to sort of learn to kind of pull back on. When you see something that needs to be changed, you immediately go in and try to change it. Immediately, like, okay, we need to revamp this. We need to like undo this and start over. I got into trouble in one of my other roles where I was actually hired to bring change, but I went in with like, okay, we're gonna change. We're gonna change this, and this needs to go. I spotted all of the blind spots and all of the areas that needed improvement, and I wanted to tackle them right away. But what I didn't do is build credibility first. And sometimes you have to play the game in order to get things done. And I think with Gen Z, they quickly throw that aside and want to get straight to like what needs to be handled. And that emotional honesty is a little too, can be a little jarring for folks. And so I can teach you how to build credibility before you try to change systems because those systems are there for a reason. And good or bad, there are going to be folks that are going to be steadfast about keeping those systems in place. Your soft skills, because you have them, are what I call superpowers. They may not translate well in today's workforce because they need some time to catch up to you. They do. So if you're a Gen Zer and you're trying to pivot into the workforce and pivot into entry-level role, these are some things that you can do. And it can definitely assist and help you tackle that. Other than that, it's been an amazing season one of Pivot Stories with Leonna Hatcher. A special thank you to all of my guests, Akinemi Owan, Jordan Estep, Rainika Weston. Thank you for honoring me with your presence on my brand new podcast and for your support. And thank you for all of those who watched season one. We're coming back with season two in a couple weeks, and we're going to have conversations, more of the same conversations with women who are pivoting out of corporate, but we're also going to have conversations with women who are in a process of pivoting out of corporate and how they're going about doing that, because I think that's important to tackle. Women who pivoted out of the workforce and, still have their toe into corporate America, because right now, as far as the economy goes, you're going to have a little side job along with your entrepreneurial endeavors in order to keep afloat. It's just the reality of where we're at. So having conversations with women who are in the process of doing that, yeah, that is my hope for season two. So to all of you who have liked my videos, who have watched, who have shared, who have commented, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that your time is valuable, and I really appreciate your support. And I hope to see you for more episodes coming soon. Until next time, are you ready for the pivot?